Kalen DeBoer to Bama's official, and Nick Saban's retired, and we got that out of the way. But there is a wide range of opinions on this thing. I got some folks, mainly the football knowledgeable crowd, telling me it's going to work. He's a Grand Slam hire. I've got the Brandon Walkers of the world telling me it's going to be a disaster, and everywhere in between. I've heard all available opinions on this. Mine exists somewhere in there too. I don't think it's going to be a disaster, so I also don't think he's the next coming of Nick Saban. Time will tell. But I think a harsh realization for almost everyone is coming, one way or the other, when Kalen DeBoer gets into year 1, 2, 3, however long he stays at Alabama. I actually think there's a harsh realization coming for everyone. And you may ask, how's that possible? Someone's got to be right here. Yeah, I'll explain to you what I mean about that. So let me quickly update you on what's happening because it's pretty significant. When Kalen DeBoer got hired, most general college football fans said, oh, the Washington head coach. Oh, that's pretty good. People who've watched Washington all year said, who's he bringing with him? Is he bringing that offensive coordinator with him? Is he bringing Ryan Grubb with him? You know, the same one that turned down Nick Saban last year before he hired Tommy Rees. Is he bringing that guy with him? It looks for all the world like he is right now. It looks like the wide receiver coach and the tight end coach is coming with him. He's going to retain Freddie Roach at Alabama, going to he's going to retain Robert Gillespie. That's the defensive line and running backs coach, respectively. So there's a mixture of guys who will stay in place with guys coming from Washington. I don't know what he's doing with strength and conditioning yet, and I'm fascinated by that. And so when I know, you'll know on that front. The defensive coordinator hire has not been made, and that's pivotal, and it was made all the more pivotal yesterday morning when word started to circulate that Kirby had sat there and probably pulled like a dark cloak down over his eyes, rubbed his hands together, and took Travaris Robinson from Alabama. I'm going to talk about that in its own segment later in the show. He brought Courtney Morgan with him as well. That's a name that a lot of people on the West Coast are really familiar with. It's a name I think people who get in the weeds a little bit of player personnel in college football are familiar with. I don't think most of you are familiar with him, nor do you need to be, but it's a very, very important general manager. Alabama football used to have a general manager. His name was Nick Saban. And now you will probably have a more modernized version of a college football front office, and Alabama football will look like a lot of other programs have started to look like, and that is you got a head coach, but you've also got a general manager there. I would venture to guess 5 years from now, a lot of programs around the South will start to try and find their Courtney Morgan. And I know that's a name that a lot of you haven't even become familiar with yet. I think you will. I don't think you can be the general manager of Alabama football, first of its kind, and not become a pretty well-known name in your own right around the South. Okay, so here's my issue. I don't have an issue. Here's the issue I think is going to exist. Colin, do you see this on my lip? You see where I bit my lip earlier today? That's terrible. I'm going to be self-conscious about it the rest of the show. So I think everyone may have an issue here. The people who think this is going to be a disaster of a hire are going to be wrong because DeBoer is too good for it to be a disaster. So everybody of sound football mind who I trust will tell you the guy is an absolute assassin, totally legit. Everywhere he's been, he's won. And that's not just a Wikipedia search. That is diving in the weeds a little bit, looking at who he's elevated, looking at how many times he's won with the second best roster on the field. He is relentless. Totally relentless is the number one adjective that most people who have been around Kalen DeBoer will give you. So the reason I'm mentioning that word is because it's essential to win. But number two, there's this train of thought out there. There's a school of thought around Kalen DeBoer that since he's not from the South and he's not perennially landed top 5 classes at any point in his career, then he's not going to get the SEC way of doing things. He's not going to recruit the way you need to recruit in the South. Well, I think he's going to. And I don't necessarily mean he's going to have Alabama parked where Nick Saban had him parked. I don't necessarily think he's going to have Alabama neck and neck with Georgia every year fighting over the number 1 spot. Guys, I don't know that he needs to. I think confidently, if Kalen DeBoer has Alabama even floating in the 5 to 10 range in recruiting, they'll be fine and they'll be a national championship player every year. Now, that's not to put a ceiling on them. I'm just saying for argument's purposes, even if they don't recruit at the level that they used to under Saban, which is likely that they don't do that, I think they'll be more than fine. But the other part of this is, let me just remind you, the folks who have failed when they've come to the South have failed because they either don't want to get with the way of doing things down here, and that's a broad strokes way to present things, but more specifically, they're too lazy Now, coaches who come to the South and fail to recruit well are not lazy by 40-hour-a-week standards. They're lazy by college football head coach being paid $8 or $9 million a year standards. So you got to live at the office. You got to eat, sleep, and breathe it. You've got to be relentless. You've got to have the characteristics that everyone who's been around DeBoer says he has. So if you're good with people, which he is, and if you're relentless, I don't doubt long-term your ability to recruit. I'm not sitting here telling you top 3 class every year. I'm just telling you I don't think talent acquisition is going to be a problem for them. I really don't. Now, that is aimed at the detractors who think the guy's going to crash and burn. He's not going to crash and burn. However, if you're looking for me to come on here and pull out the crimson and white pom-pom and wave it along with you 30-somethings down there in Tuscaloosa, I need to go Uncle Josh on you for a second. So I tried to crack the knuckles. 2 of them cracked. This is harsh reality time for you. I told you guys for a long time there is a sizable chunk of the Alabama fan base who is ill-equipped. They are very, very ill-prepared for whenever Nick Saban steps down. Well, it's here. It's happened. Through no fault of your own. If you're a Bama fan, let's say 30 years old or younger, you are a trust fund fan. It's not your fault. You were born when you were born. You were so fortunate to be able to grow up in the Nick Saban era, but you grew up wealthy as a fan. You have never lived without. You have never known hunger for a championship. You have never known 8-4. You have never known being in the teens or 20s and recruiting. You are a trust fund fan. It's only been great for you. And for you, this is going to be tough. Because even if Kalen DeBoer is the best possible version he could be, even if this ends up being an A-plus hire, there are people out there who, when they finish 7th in recruiting one year, are going to ask, what's wrong? There are people, if they go 9-3, who are going to ask, what's wrong? If you lose to LSU and Tennessee randomly in the same year, what's wrong? Well, nothing's wrong. It's just that you had a space alien as your head coach for the last 17 years, and he did stuff that hadn't been done before, and he did stuff that's not going to be done again, and the next best version of head coach in America is not remotely capable of matching that. And so I feel no sympathy for you whatsoever on one hand, because you got to grow up knowing only prosperity, but I, on another hand, do feel just a wee bit of sympathy for you because you have no idea what the future is going to be like. A Saban-less future at the University of Alabama is not something that you've known, and you're going to know it. I just want to tell you, if it feels like something's wrong, don't apply the Saban standard. Just apply regular world college football standards. Hey, 9-3 may get you in the playoffs. Hey, a top 7 recruiting class may be good enough to get you in the playoffs. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means you have simply come back down to the same earth that everyone else has had to live on when you've been up in the clouds for the past decade and a half. That's all. So there is a harsh reality to face. There's a harsh truth to face. It was always coming, and I'm not saying it's exclusive to the 30 and under Crimson crowd, because candidly, I know some folks twice your age who are really struggling to come to grips with this, but at least they've known the Mikes in Alabama. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, good. You're all the better for it. I mean, they've known, looking at Joe Kynes do a halftime Independence Bowl interview in Shreveport, Louisiana. They know. You don't know so much. It's better off that you didn't have to live through it. Your forefathers, F-O-U-R, your forefathers lived through that so that you could have a better life. And you did. And you did. Now you'll be able to tell your children, I grew up in the Saban era. I didn't have to want. And hopefully your kids don't have to want for a championship either. I'm just saying, count your blessings when you have them. You never know when it'll be gone. Luckily, Nick Saban will still be around. Won't be too far away from the program.